this machine. Okay. So good morning, everybody, and thanks very much for coming to join us on the educational kind of a little webinar about what we've organized towards the purchase of green energy. And as all of you remember, the starting point for this was the election form we had for the group that everyone executed this summer before we got started with the next purchasing cycle, that gave schools the opportunity to choose whether or not they'd like to take a look at a green energy option. So we have worked on that and as agreed after the initial purchase activity, because there's incremental cost almost always associated with green, and we wanted to have schools look at it as an option in that regard. A couple of things are important to note, and John will emphasize it in his comments, and he's going to do most of the presenting as the expert, so to speak, on the subject. John Young is with Provident Energy Consulting. That's the energy purchasing group that we use that has given us so much help and service in running the program and executing in the transactions. We specifically have designed this alternative to match up, if you will, with the next energy purchasing term, which will start in July of 2018 and go out to 2021. So we're not talking about doing it next month. We're talking about implementing it in July. And that was important so that we also could give you a chance to look at purchasing green energy as a possible option for using some of the savings that was created from the program. So we felt that was a matchup that was worth considering. Lastly, as you'll see, we created a program which has a couple of options for schools. And I will say this maybe in the beginning and at the end. One of the benefits of being a consortium and using that to purchase energy is it gives you access and the ability to the buying power of a group, the support of a group. But, you know, the other side of the coin is from an individual school's perspective, sometimes it limits the possibilities that might be out there. When you're managing a program, you've got to create something that's really doable and effective and meaningful. So we've created a couple of green buying options as a built-in, as a result of having to make a decision about what kind of a model we thought we'd like to use. So with that introduction and general background, we'll turn the meeting over to John Young.
Hey, thanks very much, Al, and thank you all who could attend and those listening in the future. An accurate and full introduction there, Al. Thank you. So just to kind of quantify the number of schools that are interested in the group, currently purchasing electricity through the consortium, there are about 67 schools. 18 thus far have expressed interest in a green power, green electric option. They are listed here. Each of these have confirmed through that selection early in the process that they are certainly interested. We went out and did all of our electricity, green energy investigations based on the assumption of having all these schools, but it certainly doesn't necessitate having them all involved. They've just all been accounted for in our process. So probably about 25% or so of the schools have expressed interest, which is, a pretty good percentage that have shown that. Just wanted to give a little bit of background on what renewable electricity, green energy is, and a little bit of the background of what constitutes green energy and the background behind it. Al and the rest of the group have made decision, and I think rightfully so, that in the spirit of the program, we should look at a high standard for the green energy that we're going to purchase. In that respect, we're using as our standard the Tier 1 green energy that is the highest standard amongst the several that are available. The further tiers down, include things that are more the use of waste products from, brown energy and so forth, and they're important, but they aren't the high standard that I think the future will dictate that we use to really have a sustainability. And I won't get into the exact specifics of the differentiation between the tiers because it's a lot of jargon and so forth. But it's important for us to note that we are in fact looking at a high standard here for the type of green energy that we're going out for, and that it's all certified and follows the rather rigid rules that dictate these different levels.
John, if I recall correctly, it's also available for lead points if you get into that kind of consideration, right?
That's precisely right, and the tier 1 is crucial for that, as well as the amount of it. That is the percentage of energy that you are actually buying through a green program. They dictate the number of points that you can accumulate for LEED certification, and also for the Energy Star that you find through the portfolio manager. This tier 1 fully certified green meets that high standard and is very important for anyone looking for any of those type of certifications. And if you're less familiar with that, we can certainly have further discussions, but it probably isn't germane to most folks in their discussions. So it is a very valid point that this is the highest standard and fully capable of meeting those needs. So a couple key things that we wanted to really go through is the idea of what are we actually purchasing here and how does it work. The standard for green electric purchasing when you're not doing it through an on-site generation is the renewable energy credit. This is the industry standard for selling the good deeds and quantifying the green energy and financially supporting green energy projects. They're renewable energy credits. As it says here, a financial mechanism to support the cost of green energy on the grid. Key to note here is that when we go out and buy green energy, no matter in what fashion we do it, outside of having on-site generation, you don't have any different quality to the energy that you're receiving. Just as when we go out and buy electric supply through PAISBOA's energy group, we don't get different electricity than anyone else gets through their powers. PECO doesn't treat us any differently. PECO, PPL, whatever distribution company that you're a part of doesn't treat you any different because you buy electric supply through Talon Energy as we do, Constellation, whomever. The power is just as readily available. You won't be cut off in any sort of fashion. It is not intermittent. It's important. May seem obvious to some folks, but it's important bridge that you need to, or gap that needs to be bridged for some folks to understand you're not putting at risk any of your facilities when you go out and buy green energy through these renewable energy credits. It also doesn't interfere with any green initiatives that you would take on your campus at all. So this will not limit your ability to go out and do any of the green initiatives that you might have thoughts of doing in the future, whether it be through photovoltaic, solar arrays, ground source heat pump, that's geothermal, anything like that. If you were to go out and try to get some rebates for replacing your older fluorescent bulbs with LEDs, this does not restrict you in any way for any of your own renewable, sustainable initiatives. These renewable energy credits are, as it says, financial mechanisms that go to support the exact projects that is listing there. Renewable energy credits are part of any calculation for the cost of installing renewable power anywhere. That is, if you were to go out and build a solar array, part of the calculations of your costs would be the monies that you got back in the form of renewable energy credit sales. So renewable energy credits are created when kilowatt hours of green energy are produced. So for every 1,000 kilowatt hours of green energy that are produced, there's an accounting process, and a renewable energy credit is created. When someone who creates green energy takes that renewable energy credit and puts it on the market, that's how they become financially compensated. So it's a key cog in supporting renewable energy energy. It's a very, very important piece, and it makes the whole green energy initiative much more financially viable. It is an underpinning of the economics of it all. So it's important to note that while this isn't having solar array on your property, that the money that you'll spend or the money that you'll allot towards this end absolutely has an impact, and it absolutely is a method of empowering people and changing the future. So with that being said, a little bit about how we went about finding these pricing for you. Provident Energy does the green energy for folks quite often. As Al had alluded to, LEED certification is very important to many folks. We have, in addition to the 60, 70 PAISBOA schools, we have about 120 public school districts and 15 county governments. And they're pretty consistently going out in one way or another to be sustainable. So we've been down and through this process before and have a very good handle on what the market is for these green energy, renewable energy credits. We did go to several suppliers, including Talon Energy, that does the normal electric supply for the group. We asked them, we asked Constellation, we asked one other company to come back that we deal with regularly and give us some pricing for the group of PAISBOA schools. One company that we do a substantial amount of not only electric purchasing but natural gas business with is WGL Energy, and we've seen them in the past do a very good job in providing a very cost-effective set of green energy, renewable energy credits. For those of you who are unfamiliar with WGL Energy, WGL is an offshoot and sister company of Washington Gas and Light. Washington Gas and Light has been around since 1848. Very substantial utility down in the Washington area. They were the initial company that was founded and lit the roadways down in the nation's capital, is where they bear their name from, Washington Gas and Light. So WGL Energy, I think probably a lot of people may not be as familiar with, but the overall company has, 160, 170 years of history, a very stable company, and in fact is one of the leaders in providing green energy solutions to the whole local grid market here. So it's one of the reasons why their energy prices are substantially better than the others that we've asked. At different times, you'll see suppliers have, lower or higher price ranges for the ability to provide these credits. At this point, and for the last year or so, WGL has really been at the forefront of providing excellent pricing. We have connected them with several of our school clients for exactly the purposes of LEED certification that Al had alluded to for. And that LEED requires that high standard tier 1 source of renewable energy credit. So we have a lot of confidence in them. We have a lot of confidence in their product, and we have a lot of confidence in their pricing, especially in contrast to the others that we've asked. Now, after belaboring that quite a while, the pricing is subject to the market. That is, there is a renewable energy market. So if we go back to them and we have a different number of schools or something substantial has happened in the interim since we've asked for this refresh price, which was within the last week, it is subject to some change. Now, I wouldn't expect that it's going to move, more than 5 or 10% on the very outside, but there is obviously some market risk that we take on as we align all the schools in the group and move them towards a contracting for their final volumes. So just to put that out there. The agreement term that we asked for coincides, as Al alluded to, with the new agreement that has a dramatic drop in price that begins this July. So the idea is to hopefully have schools be able to take on this green initiative cost and have it be offset by the lowering of the budgets that we will start experiencing with this new contract come the summer. So the school, the agreement would start beginning in July 2018 and run through the termination of the current agreement in 2021. As also had mentioned earlier, we are giving schools the option of either purchasing 50 or 100% of their electric volume in green energy. So the way it would work is you take the yearly needs of electricity for a school in kilowatt hours, and you transfer that into renewable energy credits, and those costs are borne by the school either at 50% of their load or 100% of the load. So we'll be able to show people exactly what that costs in the form that we send out to folks, hopefully that they sign and send back and indicating that they want to be part of the project here. So again, it'll be an option of either buying 50% of your electric usage history volumes or 100%. And this is important, again, for those folks seeking LEED certifications, because these two levels will indicate the level of credit that you get back towards your LEED certification. So they're important benchmark numbers, and they also offer different levels of affordability to schools should they choose to be included. We had a look at what a renewable energy credit is. This is another look at how that gets moved into actual costs for schools. A green power renewable energy credit equals 1 megawatt hour, which is 1,000 kilowatt hours, which you're familiar with, I'm sure, on your electric bills. The best offer we got, again, it was WGL Energy at $1.19 per rec. So that's $1.19 for every 1,000 kilowatt hours. To give you an example of what that would look like as far as cost, if you had a school that used 1 million kilowatt hours, a pretty common number. Some schools are 3 or 4 times that. Some schools are just a tenth of that number. That would equal, in this case, 1,000 recs at $1.19 a rec. It would be $1,190 for the year for 100% of their annual volumes being covered in renewable energy credits. So that's an example of 100% for a school that uses 1 million kilowatt hours, just to give you an idea of what the cost would look like for, say, your average school.
Hey, John, it's Adam. I have a quick question for you. I assume this is based on full participation of the schools you had on the previous slide, or did you assume a certain percentage of those schools? I'm just interested in what you might see the differential being if we only get, say, half of the schools at 50%.
That's a very fair question, Adam. The reality is that because of the nature of the RECs, there is some benefit to an overall volume. That is, that WGL is able to, pass some of their expected margins across a larger group. I don't think that if we had half, that the price would substantially change. You say substantial, it's all relative, right? So I hate to put a percentage on it, but I don't think that we're going to see a swing here of much more than, say, 10%. So if we had half the schools, maybe it's $1.30 a rec. But we did base this number on 100% participation of those 18 schools and 100% selection of volumes. So this is absolutely a price that will be affected by participation, but it is not one that's going to go off the market and double, even if we had, say, 5 schools or 30% of the volume. So it's pretty close to what we've seen in the last several months for other schools that we've done individually, other school accounts that were by themselves. So as far as the aggregate volume, I don't think it's driving down costs substantially. So if we had only a handful that wanted to be participants, I don't think we're going to see costs that dramatically rise.
Adam, I would add the competitive forces and reality in the market is this company is looking for our business. They were pretty close to the competitive number that won the bid when Talent came in, when they were one of the 10 suppliers in that process as well. So I think that they're definitely interested in getting a group within our group, almost no matter how many there are. Obviously, the more the better, if you know what I mean.
That's a fair point, and Al, we did talk about that before, and thanks for bringing it up again, Adam. To mention, these folks were the smallest of margins out of winning the bid for the overall school business that we ran back in September. They were very anxious and are very anxious to get their name out there and more recognized amongst schools. They'd love to be able to say that they serve PAISBOA. They'll be able to do that in some fashion. So they are hungry for the overall business. They're hungry to get their name out there, and they're willing and have been willing to, really curtail how much money they possibly could make on deals in effort to win new business. So thanks for pointing out again, Alan and Adam. Thanks for a very pertinent question. We didn't want to come in here and put a list of costs per school and make assumptions based on that, that they're going to be involved or what volume they will be, but we certainly will quantify that for interested schools to show them what it's going to look like on an annual basis for costs. WGL, again, pointing to their willingness to participate and get their name out there and win some business inside PAISBOA, has agreed to take the payments from the schools on annual basis. So each new contract year, they would expect a year's worth of payment. Part of the downside of not being able to go with Talon, our incumbent normal supplier, is that we can't just tack these charges onto our normal electric bill and pay them over the course of the year, because we're going to a company that isn't providing our normal power. We're not able to prorate costs over the entire period. The concession that they were willing to make, though, was to take these payments every year rather than all the costs up front that you would normally see in such an agreement. I mean to say, if someone's going to give you 3 years worth of renewable energy credits, they would expect payment to be up front. Through some negotiation with them, we were able to get them to concede that the concession that the schools could pay over the course of 3 years, rather than burdening folks up front with that larger 3-year payment. Important to note there. And we'll be able to give people what that annual number would look like. Either, you want to take a look at your budget and just do some simple math. You could figure it out pretty closely, but we'll be sure to quantify that for folks so they fully understand what they're getting involved with the program. With that being said, the next step for those schools that are interested in being part of the program would be the completion of an election form that is a commitment in writing to be part of the group. In that form we'll send out, we'll have those quantifiable annual costs for each of the schools, again, subject to some market movement, in the next week or two that we put this all together. And it'll have a timeline of next Monday to the following Monday, 10 days from now or so, was when schools would have to make that firm commitment, and then we can go back to WGL and proceed with this course of action for the group. So it'll be a form where you'll very clearly delineate what level of commitment you want to have as far as volumes and your overall commitment to being part of the green energy purchasing group.
Hey, John, Adam again, one more quick question.
Sure.
Are we going to limit that form to just those schools that put out an interest, or are we going to send it to all the schools that are in the energy consortium piece?
So I would like to leave that to Al, probably, how he'd like to handle that, actually. It certainly wouldn't be too much for us to add them if they got in early enough.
Adam, I think that as a practical matter, some of this work is based on the presumption that you're in the energy purchasing group. We have signed documents to represent you, if you know what I mean. So my inclination would be, I'm certainly willing to send that out to all of the people who didn't express an interest and just bring them up to date say that we're doing this, share this explanation, and then give them the ability to make a decision. That probably could only add volume to the situation and would give them that opportunity. So I think that's probably the best way to handle it from our perspective. Let me just go back and say, John and I will design sort of what you and I would call an enrollment form. It will have the two options identified, and it will calculate the cost for you. I know John said you could do it, but I think it's more helpful if we do indicate what the estimated cost is. We have indicative pricings, which means it might change, and I'm certainly happy to say that, if it's not within, let's say, a reasonable tolerance, I'll use 10% as an example. We'll get back to you about it, because it will just mean we didn't quite get the enrollment standard that we hoped for, and maybe it's appropriate to have that price changed by that much. But if it's over 10%, I think I would let you know. I would want you to to accept that result, as opposed to keeping you to the agreement itself. We need the document just so we have the authority to act on your behalf. WGL would want that kind of information.
Thanks. My comment was really, I think, geared towards, green energy sometimes scares people off from the cost, and
yeah.
You feel as a school like ours, as an example, if you'd like, I'm estimating it's going to cost less than $5,000 based on our usage, which I would think would be on the high end of usage in the group. Mm-hmm. And if schools that didn't express an interest saw the real cost of, $2,500, $3,000, whatever the number is, it might help them make a decision in this regard, where they may have expected $30,000 as opposed to $3,000. So.
Thank you. That's a really valuable observation, especially coming from, if you will, a customer. John and I looked at it that way, but I've always worried that my view isn't the customer's view. We feel it's relatively inexpensive. You could see their pricing against the normal market, for instance, and you could see that it's a third to 25%. And so when you really come down to it, although it's an upfront payment, it's a pretty modest cost to be able to take that initiative and go that direction. Good. Please unmute yourselves if you're on mute, and raise any other questions that you might have. I really appreciate your attention. The original group is who showed up, so it'll be valuable to circulate the recording to those who weren't here, and I'll obviously be open to addressing questions they might have. And you can be sure that I will encourage them to consider it seriously in the context of the dialogue that Adam and I just had. And the recording, you'll get it too, has the schools on it. So if you feel, I know somebody there and they really ought to take a look at that, and I'd like to be sure that they participate for the value of both institutions, just give them a call. Wouldn't hurt.
Is the enrollment form that you're going to send out going to include information about the mechanics of the payment situation?
Yes, it will, because that's important to restate up front. Definitely. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks. That's a good. That's a suggestion in the form of a question. Thank you, Martha. Okay. How's that?
I got one more. Sorry about that.
No, thank you.
We're currently engaged with Marianne Boyer and Ann Soto to do some environmental sustainability work here. Mm-hmm. And it would be really helpful to us, and maybe I know a couple other schools are involved with them, if they could just give a paragraph or two in terms of a reference on this and kind of how it may impact our overall sustainability efforts. I'm certain they'll be in favor of it. It's something we discussed with them, but I think from PAISBOA's perspective, to have a kind of a consulting approach of somebody that does this for a living to provide some backing might also be helpful.
Thank you. I work with them very closely, and I'll definitely talk with them about it. Great. Well, as always, thanks for joining us, and thanks for your participation and questions, which always makes our work better and everyone else's understanding. So,
Al, Martha, one more quick.
Yeah.
When should we expect to get the email with the form and specific school-specific information about this?
Our goal is for John and I to get it out to you on Monday, so it gives you a week to consider it and act on it. And the time frame of a week is just sort of like what seems to be reasonable, so that the pricing still will generally hold up. So that's
fair enough.
That's a period we picked. Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks, Al.
Thanks very much. Thank you all. Really appreciate your interest and your participation. Have a good day. Go Eagles next year. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, folks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Al.